everybody. Today I'm with Mohita Nagpal, and she is the VP of Marketing at an amazing company called Hiver. And Mohita is a B2B SaaS marketing leader with over 10 years of experience in growth stage product companies. She's currently VP of Marketing at Hiver. She started off her career in print journalism and transitioned to marketing when she joined Wingify as a content specialist. She's a full stack marketer with experience in demand generation, PPC, branding, and product marketing. She loves building content driven inbound engines to fuel the SaaS marketing funnel and is a strong proponent of making B2B marketing more human. I love that. Welcome to the show, Mohita.
Thanks, Paris. Thanks for inviting me.
So I want to lead off with this question. What jumped out at me most in your LinkedIn summary, your about summary, was this. B2B should not be an excuse for being boring. Would you
Right.
mind just describing to our audience what you mean by that statement?
I think you started off with a very good question. I really love that when people ask me. So I think this is a very inherent my philosophy. It's not something like I read somewhere or borrowed somewhere. It's just that like by background in journalism, I've always been excited by people's stories. Stories which people can absorb, and there's something that has emotion in it, right? And when I moved to B2B, with all the three companies I've worked with, and over the years of my experience, I've seen that people tend to default to what everyone else is already doing, right? There are set channels. This is how we do B2B, and they're supposed to be in this manner. Your content is for businesses, so it's supposed to sound professional. And when they say professional, that gives them the leeway of being boring, right? Now, really, do you want to read all of that? Like, we have so much of competition right now, so many companies are competing, and I think it's just like the easy way out, to just stick to conventions. So I feel there's a lot of scope for more empathy, humanness, and fun in B2B, right? And that's where the scope is in terms of marketing. Now that we were discussing earlier, the channels are getting saturated, so you have to innovate the existing ones, right? So you have to
Mhm.
really push the envelope, because ultimately, who's reading your content, who's consuming, who's making the decision. So it might be a business entity, but you have to appeal to a few people, right? Like, first of all, it has to be one person, and they have to be moved in some way, right? So
Mhm.
ultimately, you are marketing to humans, but a business is taking a decision.
Right. I think that's great, and bringing a human touch, I think is essential now. People have for so many years seen so much of the same stuff, and I think this is a great segue into some of the earlier stages of your career because you have been. I think there's two real, I believe, pivotal experiences that you had prior to joining Hiver, and that was at at Wingify and also at Belong.co, where you were very involved with lots of digital marketing, content marketing, and demand gen. Can you
Right.
talk a little bit about your experience in those two companies leading up to Hiver? What, how did that experience shape you into the marketer that you are today?
Right. So I don't have a formal marketing degree. I don't have an MBA. I come from a journalism background. What I had was great writing skills, and I believe great research skills. So I happened to accidentally get into marketing. It was a sheer accident. I got into it. I thought, okay, let me try it out for a while. I was not into marketing or tech per se, right? But I think I joined as a content specialist, obviously, because I already had those capabilities, those skills. But when I started working, I found it very fascinating and interesting, right? Like, and there's so many facets to it. So I joined Wingify when we were like 30 people. And as we were growing and scaling as an organization, so by the time I left, there were like 200 people. So as we were scaling, I also got a lot of opportunity to try out new channels and things, right? With marketing, we were very small, and in India, especially, B2B was not known at all. There were just a handful of companies, right? And when we started off with content marketing, that was the only thing we were doing. And as we scaled, I got to learn and grow with the organization, which was brilliant, right? We next channel we tried out was PPC, like AdWords. The next channel after that we tried was say PR, branding, events, and I got to try my hands at everything. Product marketing.
Mhm.
In the end, like when I left, my designation was actually customer marketing, which is a very very niche role even today, right? Like, because you don't get to that life cycle of the entire stage pretty easily. So, I mean, it was an amazing journey for me, almost for 4 years, where I tried out a lot. And I'm a generalist. I call myself a generalist, though I specialize in content branding. But I really like to try out everything. I kind of get bored if I if I keep doing the same thing. So it kind of paved a great, platform for me, not just to basically learn, but it's instrumental in giving me the foundation of that marketing, right? Because
Hmm.
the stage we were in at that point of time. And then I used all of that experience at Belong, basically. So basically, at Wingify, we were very inbound marketing driven. We didn't use ABM or outbound as a strategy so much. We were very, very heavily reliant on inbound because it's a bootstrap company, though. It's not like one of those companies where you just like keep burning the money to get in the leads and all.
Hmm.
So I wanted to understand the other side of things, right? Like how does ABM work? How does enterprise marketing sales work? Because again, Wingify was very SMB mid-market focused at that point of time. So Belong was a very deliberate choice in that manner because it's into HR tech. I wanted that the change over there in terms of industry as well. And over there, I worked on the demand side of things, a bit of content, demand generation, and all. I kind of spend my time, but I also realize that when you're doing enterprise, you mainly like supporting sales, which is great, but that's something that I don't pretty much enjoy. So the moment I had this opportunity with Hiver, I came on board, and I love it again because it's again very inbound driven, very SMB mid market focused, with a huge play for marketing, right? Which
Hmm.
is what I love doing. With when you build a content driven engine, a lot of focus on branding. There's a
Yeah.
lot more opportunity for marketing.
Yeah. I want to talk about something we chatted about in the pre-show. We were reminiscing about the good old days. You started around 2013. I started around
Right.
2008, and you said, I asked you, well, what worked best, and you said everything worked back then, and you're totally right. It did. Can you talk about what used to work really well then, which really doesn't work today, and how can marketers like us now adapt to those changes when the blueprint or the playbook of stuff that should work is no longer really working?
Right. I think I've learned this the very hard way because again, like as I told you in 2013 when I joined, that was the only experience I had. Right. The first blog post I wrote for them, about e-commerce best practices, started ranking within 2 to 3 weeks on page one. It used to, I remember, we used to be on the third or the fourth position on Google, and it's just like crazy, and it's not like very easy to do right now, right?
And
And
what for
it's
what
a
keyword did you rank
this
for?
was, I think, e-commerce homepage best practices or e-commerce product page best practice, which is
Oh, that's
not
good.
now not a
That's
very common, like not a very very competitive keyword, but it's not easy as well, right? Because you
hmm
had so many other players talking about the same thing. A/B testing at that point of time, like a lot of people had started getting into it. Your conversion Excel was writing about it, and Bounce was writing about it. You had very big competitive players, and like it started ranking. That was my first article ever, right? My first B2B experience, and started ranking, had 10, 15 comments, and I was like, okay, this is how it is, right? This is always
yeah.
how it's going to be. And it kept on happening all through my like first year. I think I was heavily into content, and every piece I wrote easily ranked, right?
hmm
Page one, page two, very competitive keywords as well.
Wasn't it like
uh,
magic back then, Mohita? I
I didn't
remember
know.
those days
Back then, I
also.
didn't know it was magic. Back then, I thought like this is how it's supposed to be. Right
Yeah,
now, I look back and I'm like, oh, that was magic. I miss it. But
it
at
was.
that point
Yeah,
of time, you
when you
don't
got when you
realize.
got a taste for it, it was like, oh wow, this is. It became almost addictive that you could
Right.
publish stuff and rank it easily, and you start getting traffic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that it was also the only experience I had, right? So I just thought like, and also put in a lot of effort. It was not like I just put something out. So I thought maybe like what I'm doing is really really having an impact. Same with like I remember I did a research customer, again e-commerce cart abandonment research, and this report got a lot of PR, a lot of organic PR, got into Forbes. Like we didn't even do reach out, right? Like it was all
Mhm.
organic. We didn't even realize that we were given a backlink at so many of these very good publications. Similarly, like had like over 2000 downloads. That doesn't happen anymore, right? Even with the best of brand efforts and all. So yeah, those were the things like webinars. Like I think we started doing webinars in early 2014, and it was just catching on. And I remember like you'd get like again 800,000 registrations easily. Have a very good audience in general, like in terms of the actual attendees. Unlike now
Hmm.
when it's all saturated, it's very hard to like differentiate yourself from the rest, and
Yeah.
so much of competition.
So really, webinars and ebooks, these are the formats that I remember for lead generation. They used to be pretty reliable. And as you said, a really good ebook would naturally get PR and attract backlinks, and it would rank well. You could get a ton of value and shelf life out of that. Webinars, would you could get hundreds or sometimes over 1,000 registrations. Today, that's much harder. Why do you think that's so much harder today to get traction with ebooks and with webinars?
I think there are multiple factors. One, if you look at just the industry itself and this kind of content piece, right? Everyone's writing ebooks. As a medium, it's kind of gotten saturated. People are bored of it, right? Everyone's writing ebooks. Is just for everything, not just from a business perspective. Or like today, I was just looking at something like how do you make money on the site, like those kind of things,
Hmm.
where everyone has ebooks for like $10 or free. But it's become a very common tool, right? Lead generation tool for B2C as well, basically. Uh, the other thing I feel like is also the general attention span of people, right? I mean, I think 10 years back, how things were and how things are right now with whole Instagram and all the other mediums you have, general the people's capacity to concentrate on anything and read for that long is also reducing, right? Similarly with webinars, they used to be hour long back then, right? People are like quick, like want to watch like 2 minutes, 3 minute reels right now. A lot of
Hmm.
people are consuming information in that manner, in like bite-sized quick videos now, on social
Yeah.
media and all, instead of those hour-long lectures.
Yeah, I totally agree, Mohita. I remember that it almost feels like it's full circle because in the 2010, 2012 to 2013 or so, you could rank a 500 word blog post, a well-written 500 word blog post with a few backlinks, as long as you were writing it from a pretty solid domain authority or domain rating
Right,
site, or the root domain was solid. That was pretty easy. Then the game was, oh, well, now we need to get to 1,000 words. And then there was a shift probably around, I don't know, 2014, 15. There was a big shift to long form content. And I think this
right,
was the last type of content that was primarily consumed through desktop and not through mobile, because then the mobile devices really started to take over. And I think that the mobile devices is what has also contributed to the behavioral shift
right,
of consumers. Mobile apps and everything is very instantaneous, and you also want your content. You want to consume your content that way. So an hour
fast
long
and simple.
webinar is almost for that's way too long now. And
Right,
reading an ebook that might be 10,000 words or something, that's just not something that people are really into, especially on a mobile device. And I do feel like it's coming full circle, because now the key is how do you come back to short form content but still deliver a dynamic experience, give people the answers that they want, and keep them engaged and keep them moving
right.
along your journey or moving through your funnel. Um, so how do you break the mold now? You're at Hiver, you've had these experiences, you've seen in the good old days things used to work easily. They don't work as well anymore. You can't just produce a lot of ebooks. You can't just churn out hour-long webinars. So now what do you do to innovate in this demand generation space and do something differently?
I think first of all, I've learned this the hard way. Like I came with that confidence that I've done this in the past. I can do this again. But I think I learned this the hard way that it's not going to work similarly, and we'll have to change some of these mediums, right? Everyone keeps still talking. If you go to Google, and everyone still keeps talking about write an ebook, do a webinar. No
Yeah.
one's actually talking about that these things really don't work anymore, right? So I think one of the things, some of the things we started doing is also differentiate the channels, right? So again, right now, organic SEO is a huge channel for us. So over there, our emphasis is still long form content, good content which we want to rank, right? We keep it separate, but with other mediums, like if imagine we have a webinar. We recently had a webinar with an influencer in our space. What we did was like it was a 30-minute webinar, and we divided it into chunks, like say for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and we took out nuggets from it, which we'll be promoting on LinkedIn for better engagement. So instead of just putting it behind a wall and saying, okay, you fill this form and watch it, then watch it for 30 minutes and all, we know, like, putting it behind a wall, it doesn't matter. We want to give people value. The emphasis is to give people value. I think putting behind landing paging walls and all don't really work anymore. So the idea is to give out this information as freely as possible and use social media, right? So a huge part of our emphasis now, at least in the last few months specifically, we've been able to focus on is social media. So we use that to turn out basically short form content.
Mhm.
Similarly, like we did a report recently, which was around customer support benchmark trends, right? Where we surveyed customer support professionals in terms of understanding that, what are the most important metrics for them, what is good average resolution time for them, and those kind of things. Now, this is a big report. So in the old days, I would just put the report, do a press release around it and all those kind of things, get some influences. But now what we've decided is like a lot more media channels with it. We've divided the report, taken out every graph, made it more interesting, add more narrative to
Mhm.
it, and put it on social in a bigger way. Done more infographics. So we're just repackaging the content in
Yeah,
formats people like.
right.
People are able to consume.
I totally agree with you, Mohita. I think now it's about not necessarily avoiding that long form content because some type of content really lends itself to if
Right.
you really want to go in depth and cover something very, very comprehensively and have the authority and the thought leadership that comes with that,
Right.
then still long form content's appropriate. But what people want to consume, especially on their mobile devices, is they just want snackable bites of that. So I
Right.
think this repurposing exercise is really such a key now. In
Right.
2013, 2014, you could just go out there with the long form content. People had the longer attention spans, and it was also easier to distribute that organically, at least. But now they just want to snack. So you have to chop that up into bite sized bits, little video bits here, audio bits, maybe some quotes, maybe some nice images. And I
Right.
think that is the key to a really high functioning, high performing content team is now is not only the ability to produce that content well, but then also to repurpose it and redistribute it well. And also to think about the timeline or the sequencing of how you redistribute those chopped up bite-sized bits of content. I think that's also important because you can get a much longer shelf life out of a piece of content if you're
Yeah.
smart about how you drip that out because it still will be relevant if a month later you might want to bring somebody back to it. Um, as well as mixing it into the advertising into your advertising campaigns
Right.
because I think too many of the ad campaigns are just trying to go straight to the bottom of the funnel,
Exactly. Yeah.
capture an SQL without any other previous touch points. But we encourage a lot of our clients to think about putting some of that middle funnel content into those ad funnels so that people can get a little bit more familiar with the thought leadership in the
We
brand
want
before they
like
convert.
capture top of the funnel awareness. I think it's very important to leverage campaigns like this, right? I mean, that's another thing we've consciously tried doing, as you said, right? Like it's not just about like put the ebook out there for organic consumption. If it's a really valuable, good content, use it for generating top of the funnel awareness.
Mhm. Now, how do you all do that at Hiver? Do you have a team that do you divide responsibilities between certain people who produce the core content and other people that are supposed to repurpose that and promote it?
Yeah. So the way we do this right now is, I don't think so. For repurposing, we don't have anyone yet. We still like we around 9 people in core marketing team, 8 to 9 people right now. So we have a demand generation team, which is not a team per se. If you say like 9 people overall, the two people in the demand generation team who are largely working on all the paid channels right now. So
Hmm.
which is again primarily AdWords for us. But apart from this, with content, we have around three to four people. So one person is largely responsible for content strategy, content creation. One person's doing social media. So a lot of content repurposing and all automatically, falls into their lap. And then we
Hmm.
have one person handling just distribution, right? Because this is something we've never focused earlier on because again, a lot of it was happening organically. But we did reposition last year from like a shade and box solution. I'd love to tell you more about it because that was a big branding exercise for us, and we
Hmm.
moved to the help desk space. So ever since we moved to the help desk space, the tussle to start ranking on Google is much harder.
Oh
So we
yeah.
have a dedicated distribution team where they take care of backlinks, all the strategies, and all just for this, because we again produce enormous amount of content in different formats.
Hmm. That sounds like a very well organized team. For 9 people, I think you've got it covered pretty well. Now let's come back to what you just mentioned. I really want to talk more about this. You did it's something of a rebranding, but you took the Hiver brand, which was associated with this thing called the shared inbox, and you moved over to going after association more with help desk, with a
Right,
help desk solution. Am I right?
right, right.
And about when did you all make that decision to make that pivot?
So this happened last year, roughly the same time. I think July or August. It's
Okay.
been roughly 1 year. Yeah.
And so a year in, was it worth it?
Definitely, yes, definitely. It was a very well thought out decision. Uh,
Hmm.
so it was not like one of those things. Obviously, something like this you don't just decide on, right? So with shared inboxes, if you look at shared inboxes, I think it just needed a relook at the way we look ourselves, right? So we always called ourselves a shared inbox solution, and it's a very tactical way of saying, like, we what we do basically, which is help teams manage any kind of group email address and all. So we've always been doing that, and we also were seeing a lot more competition popping up in the same category. So that was like a positive affirmation, we were moving in the right direction. But at the
Hmm.
same time, I'm just going a little behind the scenes of what led to the decision.
Sure. Yeah.
While there was a lot more competition popping up, and which was very exciting and gratifying, but on the other hand, what we were really seeing was that if you looked at Hiver, right, and that's one of the core things, that you look at how your customers are using you, right, who your customers are. So if we looked at, like, we had an honest look at the how the product was used and who was using the product, we've always been fairly function agnostic, company agnostic, because any team can use Hiver, right? Like your sales, marketing, HR, finance, anyone can use. But what we saw was there was a huge majority, like 60-70% use case, which was customer service, right? So even though we always knew that we cater to everyone, the best use case, the people, the champions, the people who really use your product and give you very good feedback, the best use case was always coming from your customer service. And by customer service, I don't mean like the conventional B2C ticketing kind of a thing, where you reach out to say an e-commerce company saying, hey, my order is not reached, and they raise a ticket, and that entire thing. But more
Hmm.
like B2B services sort of a thing, your
Hmm.
real estate, your ad agencies, your different kind of your operations, very heavily reliant on operation kind of team. So again, these were customer service, but it required more back and forth of communication instead of, hey, I've resolved your ticket.
Hmm.
So we
So there were just
saw
more complex type of issues and more
more
variance
complex.
in the support that's
Yes,
needed.
yes.
Yeah.
And a typical help desk didn't satisfy them, right? A typical help desk was not something they needed, because the way they are built are to close tickets, where Hive was built to enable seamless conversation, right? So we kind of saw an opportunity over there, that although it's a very cluttered space, taking a step, moving from a shared inbox category, where you are one of the first ones with very few players to get into a very competitive category, it kind of required multiple rethinking. But we finally understood that this is the space for us to be in, because you can look at shared inbox, but ultimately shared inbox is kind of like a subcategory of help desk if you actually look at it. So, ultimately, it was looking at our own customers which propelled this decision that, we have to go forward and reposition ourselves as, the world's first Gmail based help desk.
Hmm. And I can see that's a great, thanks for that explanation. To me, it sounds like, first of all, I think it was a great decision because shared inbox it's a new category and you're one of the creators of that category. But in terms of acquisition and demand gen, I would say it's still not a phrase. It hasn't become a household
It
phrase.
is not. It is not.
So
And
people are not really searching heavily for that, I presume.
yeah, they were not. And there was only so much headroom, we could
Yeah.
grow. like
Right.
because beyond a point there was no, as you said, no more search for it.
Yeah, I think this is a great case study in having a SaaS company which creates a category and then moves to a higher, either moves adjacent to an adjacent category that's more well established, or they may move
I
um,
think of the shared inbox
to another.
category as a child category of help desk.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Yeah, and I think this is a great example of reaching a state of traction, success, maturity where you're ready to do that, and you all decided it was time to do that. I was looking at G2, and you all are still in the category of shared inbox software with front and with well, HubSpot is there with their solution, and there's a bunch of other
I
players.
think HubSpot is just accidentally there. They don't really
I think
have a
HubSpot is accidentally in a lot of
in
G2
lot of
categories.
categories.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something's going on there. There's a lot of ways to slip on that. It's a slippery slope with HubSpot. I mean, there's a hundred
Right.
ways they can get you in, and then it's a quick upgrading and upselling from there. But let's not go there. I think what's interesting is when I go to your website and your homepage, you've optimized the SEO title, the page title for world's first Gmail based help desk. So clearly you're going after help desk. I really also love that you are connecting with, you're really resonating with Gmail because it's very clear that people who are on Gmail now, it was G Suite, now I think it's called Google Workplace. They change that
Right.
every couple of years. But basically, Gmail is Gmail. Everybody knows what Gmail is. And I think that this is an interesting move because I've seen other SaaS players do the same thing. I saw what's now Copper, the CRM Copper, they were formerly called ProsperWorks. I
Right.
think what got them to where they were was they said, we are the best CRM for Gmail. If you're
Right.
using Gmail, then you have to use us because we have the deepest, most native integration. It's seamless. And effectively, you can manage your CRM inside of your inbox in Gmail. You don't have to go out, come back in and go out, copy paste stuff. And I see that you all are taking a similar angle, and it's bold because you're the world's first Gmail-based help desk, and I think that's awesome that you put that flag in the ground like that. So, can you talk to me about also the decision to really latch on, so to speak, or hitch your wagon to Gmail?
I think it was a very obvious decision for us, just like Prosper works in Copper, right? Like we operate natively out of Gmail. That's the only solution we've built because from the very beginning, I mean, this is the founder backstory, right? When he was trying to, work with Gmail to have a conversation with his, colleagues across and all, he was finding it difficult to manage communication. So if you look at the way the product has evolved over the years, it's been very organic product growth through the customer feedback, right? We never jumped or thought like too much in too much farther down the line. We always took very small steps basis the customer feedback, and we always realized that Gmail was a very organic choice. Neeraj, who's the CEO of the company, for him to start building the solution because he saw more and more businesses were starting out on Google Workspace, formerly G Suite. So it made a lot of sense that for him it was like, why do I have to go to a different solution to manage these things, right? It's such a clean system. I mean, it should ideally be working within Gmail itself. So I think it was a very organic choice. And with marketing, I think with every good marketing, if I were to say so, like it stems from the founder story, right? Where it should be simple. Like that's one of the core principles of Hiver. Like that, it's very simple. If you go to like G2 Crowd, everyone keeps talking about how simple to use the product is, how easy it is to get started. So I think that was the entire crux of it. And I think within Gmail, like by working within Gmail, it gives us that advantage, right? Any other solution, if it's working outside of it, it's not going to be as uh, seamless, right? You have to log
Mhm.
into a different solution, constantly switch tabs. Just with being within Gmail enables that simplicity. And we've obviously latched on to that positioning because it also gives us the competitive advantage, right? When you are entering such a competitive category, I have to differentiate how are we different, right? So I think being within Gmail gives us that advantage, or at least tells everyone that, hey, how are we different? Basically, anyone who's going to make a choice knows that there's a choice that if they go for Freshworks or Zendesk, these are the advantages. There's a different solution and all. But if I want to stay within
Mhm.
Gmail and have that simplicity, then Hive is the best choice out there. You know,
Mhm.
we are not saying that we are the most comprehensive solution, but we are saying that we are the best solution if you want to work within Gmail and keep things simple for yourself.
Yeah. Does it hurt to pretty much cut out all the Outlook customers by doing that, or do you have Outlook customers, or is it this
We
is
don't. We
wouldn't make
actually don't
sense?
work with Outlook. I mean, from a
Yeah.
technical standpoint, it's not
Okay.
very. I'm not like a technical person. It's not very easy to build a solution out there, the way it
Yeah.
is for Google, because they open their APIs and everything.
Hmm.
Does it hurt a little bit to me as a marketer? I don't think so too as a company, because like if you look at G Suite, I mean, I don't know the exact numbers. Last numbers I saw, they're like hundreds and thousands of
Oh
basically
yeah.
G Suite customers, right? So it's a huge
Hmm.
market you have to play in, right?
Hmm.
I think the challenge for me personally with marketing was initially to how do I cut out certain channels. I mean, the room for experimentation slightly lowers when you know that you can't go very broad with your channels, right?
Hmm.
I have to go with the hunch that okay, over here I'm going to find more people who are using G Suite instead of Outlook, right? So I have to
Hmm.
I have to plan out my channels or like any kind of paid campaigns in such a manner, like when I'm doing any campaign with anyone, that if they are very like old school sort of companies, that they are not a right fit for us, because you assume they're going to be on Outlook, right? So that automatically also helps you define that okay, I'm going to play in that, hey, fast growing companies, largely in US, in the SMB mid market range. That's my best bet. And this we've learned through a lot of trials and errors, especially when we did ABM. Because with
Hmm.
inbound, right, obviously people were coming in on their own, and we would get mostly G Suite. We rarely get Outlook because we've been so upfront on our website that hey, we work only with G Suite.
Hmm.
But with outbound, I think when you reach out, you get much more clarity of what kind of companies typically would be on G Suite. You know, so your
Hmm.
typical old-fashioned bigger companies are all on Outlook. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of learning curve, I would say, over there, more than
Yeah.
anything else.
And I'd like to dig a little bit into your ABM strategy because I'm very fascinated by this now. So you need to target companies probably of a certain size that have a support team and a manager who's going to be the ICP, the buyer, and you need to know that they're on G Suite or Google Marketing. What is
Google
it called?
Workspace, yeah.
Marketplace. Yeah.
Marketplace, yeah.
Okay. I'll just keep calling it G Suite because I still haven't broken that habit.
Yeah, that's
So,
completely fine.
do you use something like a built with or some sort of an enrichment tool that will basically immediately weed out and just narrow down the target list to Gmail,
Yeah.
G
So
Suite?
we use a bunch of tools. We even use Crunchbase to get some data, and even they have a filter. But the
Hmm.
hard truth is that none of these tools are reliable, right? Like none of these tools are like 100%. They'll give you like 70-80%. So that's why
Hmm.
we have a in-house team of data analysts who also, like, we use bunch of tools to get a layer of, like, say we get the data from Crunchbase and then using built with. But then we also have a in-house data analyst team which also basically checks all of these emails manually, which is a very old-fashioned way. But we
Hmm.
do this in-house because we are very particular about, okay, not spamming people. We try to be a little ethical with everything we're trying to do.
Hmm. And is there a connection between ABM and outbound?
So I at least think of it in this way. I think outbound used to be the preferred term, which was used earlier, and then I think at some point of time, outbound kind of started being known to be notorious because people would be cold calling, cold emailing a
Hmm.
lot, right? I think ABM is like the slick, fancier version of it, where
Hmm.
I think you are doing a lot more educated, nuanced reach out, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's evolved to be ABM. I mean, some people still call it outbound, but ABM is something where your marketing and sales is far more aligned. The difference between like someone just picking up a call, hey, I want to sell over here. You do the research. Okay, I want to reach out to Paris for this tool that will help
Hmm.
his podcast, and you make a very educated guess over there, and also do your research in terms of showing him all the relevant ads on the websites he's likely to be, and work with your marketing team to get the messaging right. That he's the
Hmm.
persona for what kind of messaging will work. So you'll also do a lot more research. So it's just a lot more educated, research based kind of targeting instead of a
Hmm.
very broad targeting.
Yeah. And can you describe the ideal customer profile or the persona who you're selling to and who will make that decision and has the budget?
So for us, this customer persona conversation has like evolved a lot in the last 2 years, right? Because again, with the positioning change, everything changed. When we were in the shared inbox space, we were again going after very very small companies, right? uh, one thing also happens is when you're doing more of inbound and when you have a very horizontal product, you realize you don't have one persona, you have multiple personas, right? So imagine being a horizontal product being used by finance, HR in any kind of company, right? So it's almost impossible to flesh out like clear personas. But I think with our ABM strategy, where we have kind of understood that okay, these are the companies we want to reach out, this is the persona we want to reach out. This is where we have kind of nailed it. I wouldn't say nailed it, but we've got a much better clarity in terms of to who our persona is. So we largely say reaching out to your customer operations manager, customer support managers in again mid market, SMB mid market sort of companies. And with industries, we are very hot. Again, we are very agnostic, but we are very very hot on your say the high growth startups, your logistics companies, as I was explaining earlier, because logistics again involves a lot of back and forth communication
Hmm.
with different teams within the company, your finance teams. And apart from the support persona, we also have finance teams using Hiver a lot. And then this
Hmm.
is a use case we have seen internally also a lot more, that we have account payables, account receivables using Hiver because they get so many bills and they need to cater to so many
Oh,
things.
interesting. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Let's talk now about the other motion, the bottom up motion, which I like to call product led growth.
Right,
And it appears that on your website, I could either request a demo or I could start a free trial.
right,
And the free trial to me, the 14-day free trial is the product led growth
right.
motion. And you're asking for name, phone, email. Approximately, what is the breakout or the ratio of the initial, well, let's just call them conversions here, the initial conversions that come from this product led growth free trial motion versus the request a demo? How do the numbers shake out?
So, by conversions, I would assume you're saying the marketing qualified lead, which is the marketing goal. Is that
Yeah,
so?
is do you define marketing qualified lead as a free trial
Yeah,
start?
yeah, as a free
Okay,
trial, right? So,
so yeah,
so for marketing, the goal is to generate MQLs, which is again your through free trial demos. There's even an on-demand webinar. There are multiple ways. Even the on-demand webinar is intended to be this, like just watch a 5 minute video and then sign up for a call back or something like that. So basically, the ratio would be, I would say, around uh, 60-40, I would say,
okay.
with more leaning towards free trial.
Hmm.
Although of late, like the on-demand webinar CTA which we have on the homepage, it was one of the most recent experiments we did, which is doing great for us, right? So
Really?
earlier the
Mhm.
division would always be the free trial and the demo, right? So we also thought that hey, maybe like we need to give people something in between
Yeah.
where they might not want to commit to an entire, they might not want to speak to a sales guy right now, but they might want to look at the product a little more, right? They want to just get a feel of what it is instead of just the pictures and a short snippet sort of a thing. So we have this on demand webinar which is around runs for around 9 minutes and we capture the information. So this is something that's performing very well for us actually, and
Hmm.
it's eating into the share of actually both the other, for the demo as well as the trial. Typically, although we do see trial to be the first number one conversion, goal among all three.
Hmm. That's very, very interesting. And I think this is a great lesson for our listeners, which is you don't have to only have a binary split between an MQL motion and an SQL, where you're either pushing people into free trial or you're going to push them into a demo, into a demo calendar booking. But there's something in the middle. So you took some of the content from what would commonly be shown in a demo, you packaged it into a 9-minute webinar, on demand webinar, and then you actually generated MQLs for those video
Right,
views.
right,
I think
right.
that's a quite innovative approach. And you're saying it's working really well.
It's working really well because again, this is something also from our own experience, right? A lot of times you don't really want to commit to talk to someone because once you commit to speaking
Yeah.
to salesperson, they really want to speak to you, right? Like they want to call
Hmm.
you and everything. But at the same time, you want to let go.
Absolutely. I think this is one of the other big behavioral shifts that's happened just in this pandemic period. Um, and I've been thinking about this a lot, but people are much less willing, even though they probably have more time in their hands and they might spend all day on video calls. So they're definitely comfortable doing that. Or maybe
Right,
they're burned out doing that. But they're reluctant to talk to sales because a lot of times they feel more empowered to make their own decision. They feel like they know what they need and they need to just get their hands on the product
right,
and try to see if this is the product that solves my number one pain point. And I think product led growth is a better experience. And the big KPI that I see with a lot of companies doing product led growth is that time to first value, where the user or the prospect can really deeply visualize themselves or they can actually experience the product and they can taste that value. They might have a little taste of the value, but they do get a taste and they say, there's a light bulb moment. The faster you can get to that light bulb moment, the more likely you're gonna eventually get, if you can get them on a sales call if you want, or they're gonna keep going further and further. And I think that this 9 minute video, that length, I like that length a lot because I think you can do a lot in 9 minutes that you definitely couldn't do in a 1 minute
right.
explainer type of brand video. And people don't want to sit around for 25, 30 minutes
25.
either because you're going to
Right,
lose them. So you shrunk it down to 9 minutes and then you gated it, which is actually, I think this is cutting against the grain because I don't see many companies, especially SaaS companies, gating a 9 minute video anywhere. But you're doing it and it's working. And I think that's really awesome. So that might be stealing share away from your classic MQL, the free trial start. But do those MQLs convert to SQLs at a higher percentage than the typical
right
MQL?
now, I think we're just seeing almost a similar. I mean, obviously, the percentage of those converting from demo is higher, and I think after that, it's the webinar on demand webinar, and maybe after that the free trial. But there's not a huge difference.
Okay. Yeah, but just having that third option is great for
Also,
people
I think
because
the way
nine
we
minutes.
do sales is also very different, right? Although we do heavily rely on product led growth, but with
Hmm.
every trial that comes in from either of these three mediums, we have a sales team who speaks to them. So
Okay.
every
Yeah.
trial is spoken to.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You're getting the name and the email and the phone number, so I'm assuming
right,
somebody's gonna touch them, and maybe depending on the size of the company or the number of seats, it'll get
right,
assigned a priority, and you'll have maybe a higher touch from sales
right.
with the bigger fish. One thing I'm curious about on the product led growth side is it would seem to me to be technically possible, which is why don't you just ask them to connect right in with their G Suite account and then fire an email to support at company name so they can actually experience it. They can experience the flow of receiving an email to support at hiver.com and then reassigning that to someone on their team. Or is
So you're
that
saying,
asking too much at
so
that
you're saying is
stage?
that are you saying when while they're signing up, they sign in through their G Suite? Is this what you mean?
Yeah, instead of starting a free trial, which is basically filling out a short form and waiting for
Right.
something to happen, you just tell
Oh,
them connect.
you don't wait. You connect right away.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay, sorry then.
basically,
I didn't go through the proper flow
so
then.
I'll tell you what happened. So when I joined, we just had one flow where you come to the website and you input your email and you click and you just automatically do auth like the authorization to use your G Suite email ID, and then you basically start using the product. You go within
Hmm.
Gmail and start using the product. But I added the free trial form basically, and I changed the onboarding that as soon as you fill out the form, then it takes your G Suite ID and does the auth and the process starts. And the primary reason for this is because we would get a lot of junk with that, right? Like
Okay.
it was kind of like nightmare, and also the information you collect, you didn't have enough information because we were also moving a little up market, right? We don't completely
Hmm.
cater to SMBs, and we have a very well established sales process. So
Okay.
because if you're just asking them to connect through G Suite, you would have a lot of your personal email IDs, people joining from their personal.
Okay. Would
Yeah.
there is there a way to exclude Gmail and narrow that or filter that only for business accounts so that you could eliminate all that junk?
You could, but I think it was just leading to, since the sign up, I think it's just one of the two choices. I mean, we'd probably get more emails, like, when you directly logging in through G Suite, right? Like it
Hmm.
also makes it easier to sign up, uh, like, because the process is very, very simple. But again, you're not able to do any kind of segmentation in terms of who it is, what kind of company it is, like how do you
Hmm.
route it to SGRs and all. So I think in terms of SGR
Okay.
efficiency also, that's something, that
Yeah,
sales efficiency takes a kind of a setback.
I
I,
see.
I think it's one of those decisions. Even you go with either of them, you either create a lot more leads, but the intent is much lower, because when once you if you make it very easy for someone to sign up, it also brings in a lot more junk, and this is not just Gmail, but generally low intent, where they just
Hmm.
like, sign
Yeah.
up like that. And there's a other route where you have a form, so basically you make it slightly harder, but you also ensure if they're spending their time, they're serious about it,
Yeah.
right?
So you
And
have
they
to
check.
pre-qualify a little bit up front.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting trade-off, and I think a lot of SaaS companies are facing that trade-off because there's a lot of hype and around product-led growth. But in some cases, if you're going to really just flood, if you're going to be just receiving a flood of users who will never ever upgrade to any paid plan, well, maybe that's just going to tax your resources, and maybe you're just going to have to support, I don't know, thousands or hundreds of thousands of accounts over time that are never going to do anything. But I guess it does really depend on the product because in some cases, some companies are willing to accept that because they're able to determine types of signals where somebody might be ready. They might be qualified. It could be an onboarding flow where you try to capture that pre-qualification information as they start to use the product itself or something like that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of room to think through these flows and ultimately, and it sounds like you're doing this. Ultimately, you just have to test each one and see. And you tested this quasi MQ. Well, I don't know what we'd call it. It's a gated 9-minute form, which generates a higher quality MQL. And I think that was also a great move. And you say it works better than the classic the classic free trial start. Yeah. Well, this is fascinating stuff. I think we could go on a lot longer, and I would have a lot more questions, but I guess we can wrap up. But before we do, Mohita, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wished I would have asked you that you would like for our audience to know?
Oh, that makes it very, very broad for me, I would say. I mean, I think it's just like a very. I think I just like generally am someone who's a lot more focused on branding and storytelling now. I think as a medium, is that something I usually like to talk about,
Hmm.
and that's like again a huge emphasis we have at Hiver, where obviously we're going out with the positioning, as you yourself pointed out, right, with the world's first Gmail-based help desk and the entire product-led growth. But I think a lot of our innovation also comes from our brand building and storytelling, and I think
Hmm.
we try and focus on that. Being a small company, we still have our eyes on branding, because we want to differentiate from the rest, and we know ultimately, again, we're
Hmm.
marketing for humans, as I started,
Yeah.
you know and that's been a part, and again, it's not like it's the prime focus, because being in the stage we are right now, I think it's very important when you're scaling to be focused more on demand, right? And as you grow, because again, branding doesn't have direct ROI yet. But I
Hmm.
think as a company, we've been very cognizant of the fact that's an important factor for us, and we try to do that in a lot of ways, right? And we borrow a lot from B2C over there, and some of the B2B companies done it, like, if you've seen Mailchimp, uh, it has this very amiable kind of a character, a chimp, right? Like a
Hmm.
brand mascot kind of a thing. So at Hiver, we have a bee as a mascot, which we try and, like, put out a lot more, and we use a lot more friendly colors, a lot of yellows,
Yeah.
whites, and pinks, and there's a lot of emphasis to uh, be a recognizable brand and be a amiable brand with our entire story right now.
Hmm. I love the storytelling approach and the human approach, and it's very easy for SaaS companies, especially in their earlier stages where they're really trying to scale. It's very tempting and it's very easy for them to focus purely on growth marketing, demand gen, and not really to place the right value in investing in the brand. Because ultimately, I think in all these categories, the winners, the top one, two, three, are going to also be by default the most recognizable brands. And they will be these companies that paid attention to and nurtured their brand building along the way. Because if you don't do that and you fail to tell your story, I had a guest on a few months back, and he said that we've just reached the point where the majority of SaaS buyers are millennials, the majority. And millennials make decisions very differently. They make decisions very collaboratively, and they like to choose companies that have a connection or an affinity with their own values. They love a brand that tells a story and says, this is who we are, this is the founder's story, this is why he created this tool, because he was frustrated with having to always leave his Gmail and go into a clunky help desk solution. So he scratched his own itch. And these are our values and these are our people. This is what we stand for. And millennial buyers resonate with that. And I think that's a big part of this too, is that if you don't try to tell a story like that, well, then you risk being just a commodity, really, at that point. And people are maybe will choose you because your feature set and your price are a little bit better than the next guy, but you really want people that are choosing you because you do have a great product and they can connect with your brand and with your story. And I think that's the human aspect that you mentioned. Well, yeah, I think that's a great place to end it. Mohita, we came um, quite full circle.
Full circle,
A lot of
yeah.
geeky stuff, but we ended with big picture, and I think brand always needs to be a priority, no matter what stage you're in as a growth SaaS company. So, well, thank you very much for spending this almost an hour with me today, Mohita. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Paris. I really enjoyed this conversation. I know like we had to reschedule a couple of times, but I really, really loved speaking to you. It was a really energizing conversation.
Same
So
here.
thank you for
Same
inviting me.
here. All right. Well, you have a great day.